everyone. Let's get dangerous. Who are you talking to?
No one. Your mama. Shut up. Take your pick.
It's Jake Ciely.
He's opening our minds to new ideas. Kill him!
You just made the list.
Oh, wait, you're serious? Let me laugh even harder.
It's all in fantasy, tales of the ranks.
Sure, we talk about it all the time. Really? No. Burn.
Game on, you Ducks. It is week 16 of the fantasy football season. It's almost over, so hopefully you're still in it, or you're just listening because you love the sound of my voice, or more so, you probably saw the guest and you're like, hey, I haven't seen him in a while, and I know how awesome Jake and him are together, so that's why I'm actually checking out the podcast, because I got booted from my playoffs. You know what's funny? Before we get to the whole waivers, ranks this week, and everything like that, Joe Pisapia at Joe Pisapia 17, by the way, over at Fantasy Pros, over at the podcast. You know what? I'll let you also pimp yourself here in a second. How about that?
No.
The interesting thing is in the intro where I pulled that clip from Futurama, which is the flat world, by the way, where he says he's introducing us to new ideas. Kill him. It made me think of the tweet that I put out the other day, which, I mean, it's X, so I guess I should expect, 20% of the population to be dumpster juice. But all I said was I want to get your opinion on this, Joe, because this is what we do in the flex leagues. Somebody was like, oh man, I scored 170. It was like my best week of the year. And somehow this dude who barely ever sets his lineup scored 180 in the playoffs. And now I'm out despite the other side scoring like 100. And I said, this is why I'm a big proponent of, if you want to call it all play, I call it scores advanced, because you don't actually play everyone because we still have buys. But whatever you want to call it, the two scores advanced versus having head-to-head once you get into the playoffs, because what are the matchups when you get to the playoffs anyway? Why is it on you that, I just happened to face Joe and both of us scored 170-something. On the other side of the bracket, they just happened to face each other and both score 100, and now one of those guys gets to advance and one of us has to go home. And this is why I did it, especially because, we do want as much skill as possible. But the pushback I got, Joe, I mean, people talking about, make sure you tell your wife's boyfriend, I hope he wins his fantasy league. Yeah, it was like beta, MAGA, every term that you could throw out, everything you could. So anyway, I just want to get your thoughts on it, because you're in the flex leagues. That's how we play. Are you a fan of it? And again, I just tell everybody, if you want to play with 14 bleeping, ducking kickers, go right ahead, play however you want. I was just saying it's something we like, but when I say we, does that necessarily include Joe Pisapia?
Well, Jake Ciely, were you painting your nails when you made them rules? I'm just kind of curious. Look, all right, here we go. I actually really like what you do in the flex leagues, and we actually had a discussion about this very topic yesterday on Out of Bounds over on Fantasy Pros with Bogman Welsh and myself. We were talking about this whole playoffs versus the all play and all these things. And maybe it was because of maybe yours was the tweet that inspired this conversation because someone brought it up. So look at you, inspiring content all over the fantasy football landscape. But the concept of you play your opponent and you play the league median score every week in the regular season, I love that. Because over a longer season, you're going to slowly chip away the teams that are no good, but also reward the teams that are good every single week, but maybe have some bad luck. And I do think if you look at the rosters in those quote-unquote expert leagues that are in the playoffs, those are undeniably the best rosters that deserve to be in the playoffs. But once you get in the playoffs, to me, that's the fun of it. The fun of it is there are upsets. The fun is that, yeah, you know what? You could lose any given week. It's what happens in the NFL. I think for the last couple of weeks, it adds a little excitement and a little panache and a little old school. Life is hard. Get your helmet. Sometimes you lose. And everybody has to learn how to lose a little bit easier in life too. You learn a lot from losing. You go back and say, hey, you know what? I lost. I could have beat this team. I could have beat that team. But you know what? I mean, what are the Lions sitting around right now going, well, we scored 40-something points. We could have beat the Jets and the Jaguars this week, but we had to play the Buffalo Bills. No, nobody says that because it's ridiculous. So I love it in the regular season, the all play aspect over the median score plus your opponent, and that's your record. So you go 2-0 or 1-1 or 0-2 during the year. But when you get in the playoffs, I do like the one and done. It's fun. It's exciting. Anything can happen. Does it suck? Yeah. Is what you're saying more equitable? Sure. But by the time you get in the playoffs, I think the equity needs to go out the window. It's the March Madness aspect of it that we play fantasy football for. So I actually prefer hey, This is the matchup. This is how it is.
You drew.
You lose, you lose. Hey, look, in this 2 CBS experts leagues, I made the playoffs in both. I had one of the best records in both. I'm out. I lost in both. In flex, I got into the playoffs. Not the best.
Not even a second quarterback.
Not having a second quarterback. My quarters have really just everything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong. And I kept managing through. I kept plowing through, and now I'm in the second round there. And you know what? That's life. That's, sometimes you eat the bear, sometimes the bear, he eats you. There's a little Big Lebowski for you.
So the only pushback I will say, again, play how everybody wants. That's the biggest thing. Is it was just shocking. I guess I shouldn't be shocked that instead of being oh, that's interesting, but I still prefer, Joe just laid out, it was just
so odd. I don't,
What?
Toxicity on X. That seems.
Oh, yeah. No, what a shocker on that. But yeah, it's somebody even said yesterday is I get to watch all 4 box scores, and it's that fight, it's that little bit of guillotine-ness that you get Monday night. So it's
I'm all for rewarding equity to get the best teams in the playoffs. But once you're in the playoffs, what playoffs? Then let's just play season-long fantasy football and kill that, just like they killed fantasy baseball all those years ago, because nobody would convert over.
Here's my one other thing too, is everybody who's a proponent of the 6 seed being points, it's the same basis. It's you're rewarding the person with points, which is you're rewarding the person with the most points in the playoffs. And again, you're not one team. You're not the Bills. You have Bills, Chiefs, Ravens. Right. Joe, the matchup they happen to draw, it's 18 different matchups. But anyway, play how you damn want. This is why we do this. But real quick, you mentioned out of bounds. Everything else you got going over at Fantasy Pros, we'll do that, and then we'll jump into the waivers and stuff.
Well, all the stuff on Fantasy Pros, obviously. We've got the Fantasy Pros MLB stuff starting up already, too, and the Betting Pros is really taking off. So if you're trying to make wagers, check out our Betting Pros content. We got 5 YouTube shows a week. We've got audio-only shows. We've got all kinds of live stream content going on in the Betting Pros, and with the college football playoffs going on soon, on top of the NFL playoffs looming, it's spectacular. Got NBA coverage. Everything's going on there right now, so it's a great place to
I hit the London
toes into the.
I hit the London first touchdown for the
there
game
you go.
on Monday Night Football. So actually, Meanie,
I'm so glad I didn't watch a snap of that game. Just for the record, I watched the Vikings game and I said I'm not.
Hold on, I have the record. Meanie and I were tracking it because I started the season off ridiculously hot. I'm still over 50% for first touchdown calls on Monday Night Football and Thursday Night Football. Which,
considering the return of those numbers, you should be.
I was just about to say, I'm not going to tell you what I have, but I don't actually sprinkle that much, unfortunately.
Well, let's just say half of it went to get me on the show today.
It did, and the other was paying for my wife's boyfriend's trip. So there you go.
Well, he needed it.
He needed the vacation.
It's been a long season for him.
Well, you got to come visit. He hasn't seen her in a while, so. Let's talk quarterbacks, because you also didn't see how miserable Kirk Cousins is. But that's not where I want to go for this. For waivers, at this point, there still are people playing the streaming game. There are still people playing matchups, maybe have 2-3 quarterbacks on their roster at this point. So I grouped them in 2 different ones. And I want to talk about the big 3 that are hovering around that 50-60% on Yahoo that you might want to risk it, but you might feel a little uneasy about it. So there's 3. It's Anthony Richardson, who we just saw his floor, played a miserable game, still finishes his QB 16 in most leagues, QB 15 actually in some, QB 18 depending on how much you're penalized. In that range is the point, because he runs, and he got the rushing touchdown. Jameis Winston, which we know scores you 30 or 3, there's no in between with him, might not even be the quarterback this week, but we're playing this as if he is, Joe. And then Bo Nix, who had a case there for a while where he was pushing for Rookie of the Year on the heels of Jaden Daniels, kind of fell off, but for fantasy purposes has been hovering around fringe QB1. For this week and this week only on waivers, of those 3, do you have a strong preference? Anthony Richardson, Jameis Winston, I have a feeling. At Cincinnati seems so tasty.
I know.
And then Bo Nix on a short week at Los Angeles on Thursday Night Football. Which would you lean?
Look, man, I know that the game against Denver was really fun, but, there's definitely been some regressions. Even that, if you look at the Winston lines, too, the last 3 games, he's got 11 interceptions. So that's just, it's not going to go well. It's just, even though I think that is the poison fruit that's hanging there that you want to take because it's such a good matchup. And instead of saying, let me get the points and get out of here, Richardson also very volatile. I like that he's at home. The Tennessee Titans defense, though, is, no pushover. So I'm just going to go with Bo Nix here. And I know it's on the road against the Chargers, but I think the floor of Bo Nix is very good. I know he had some issues with some picks, and I know the last 2 games a little bit of that too. But if you're worried about him going on the road, let's not forget, he finishes QB 12 against Kansas City on the road, QB 15 against Baltimore on the road. Those are two tough environments. I think much tougher of environment than the Chargers. There's not exactly a big fan base out there. It's not like a rabid, difficult weather area or anything like that. So I think the evolution of Bo Nix and the fact that I'm at this point in the season, I'm saying, I'm comfortable with the floor of Bo Nix, tells you how far they've come and what Sean Payton's been able to do with him. So I'm going to take Nix. I know the volatility and the upside is tempting with the other two. So unless I'm looking at a matchup where I'm just like, look, I am way out of my depth here. My team stinks. That team is amazing. I'm just saying, if you're including that, then maybe Richardson, at home is that play where you just say, okay, maybe you get that big game from Richardson. But Winston, even with them talking about replacing him, if he struggles in the first quarter, who knows? Like, you can't take that aspect. You can't have that happen to you in the playoffs.
No, and that's what I was going to say, is adding that Winston level to it. It was like, hey, look, understand the ceiling, but understand you might be gone by the second quarter. You get a big fast. Sidebar, if you could pick one stadium, would you rather visit Minnesota Stadium or the Chargers/Rams Stadium?
Oh, Minnesota is a cool environment, and I love the crowd there, too. It's a very good crowd, but I kind of want to see the new home of the NFL, to be honest. My cousin went, and she did a tour there a couple years ago. And she said it was just an incredible building. So I wouldn't want to see that building, because that's their spot. That's the NFL LA office, basically. And then I can see all my friends like Laquan and Adam and hang out with all of them and have lunch. And that'd be a nice day. It's cold in Minnesota.
Yeah, that's true. Well, depending on where you go.
I'm old.
I zoomed in a little bit. I'm already wearing the Christmas. This is an ugly Christmas Mega Man shirt.
Nice.
If I knew we were originally going to have Jay on for the rankings this week with Joe Pisapia, and if I knew if it was only going to be Joe Pisapia, I would have wore my Sweep the Leg Christmas T-shirt instead. Yeah, see, and if you are watching on YouTube, you can see if you have an eagle eye, the CM Punk shirt that Joe. I don't know why are you hiding it?
I'm not hiding it. I told you I'm old. It's cold out. It's like just wearing the T-shirt through the little zip up on. But I'm proud. I told you my other CM Punk shirt, which I did not.
You can't say on the podcast.
Well, it says I'm old, I'm hurt, I'm tired, and I work with blanking children. That's a classic. I'm gonna wear that on my live stream tomorrow, though.
Oh, I was gonna say, it feels like that's something you would wear specifically for me.
I should have thought about it, but either way, it's us against the world.
All right, more quarterbacks. Now we're getting into dicey territory here, and possibly SuperFlex, but we do the range, just like over at Fantasy Pros, the range of leagues that you might be in. Aaron Rodgers, who decided like, hey, I'm the guy that you wanted. Too bad it's too late for that. Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford laid an egg against the 49ers defense, but the 49ers defense surprisingly somehow... They've lost so many people and still play well. I don't get it. Drake May, which we know his season, Caleb Williams, which we know his season, and then Kirk Cousins, who has the Giants at home, but he also couldn't do anything against the Raiders. So, does it matter that much? If you had to go, would you play the hot hand Aaron Rodgers? Is there somebody else in between? Or would you go all the way down to the dredges of Kirk Cousins, who he's basically, you know what? I just figured this out, Joe, while we're doing this podcast. Maybe there's only one Achilles between the two of them, and they can't both use it at the same. Like Kirk Cousins had it in the middle of the season, and now he gave it to Rodgers.
Is that like the NFL version of the movie Face Off with Nick Cage and John Travolta?
They switch.
They switch. They switch. Look, do I want to buy into the rebirth of Aaron Rodgers, or do I want to just say, oh, look what happens when you play the Jaguars and the Dolphins? I think that's what I want to say about the rebirth of Aaron Rodgers. Honestly, I do. I mean, let's also not. Where do all old people go to retire, right? Florida. And it seems like that's the only place Aaron Rodgers is able to play, where it's warmer out at this point in his career. You'd think the old Green Bay guy would be okay. It's going to get cold this weekend in the Northeast.
I was going to say, what's the weather in East Rutherford?
Yeah, chilly, hence the zip up today. So what I would say is this. I think I want to go with the guy who's got the most to play for, and it's Stafford. And I think everybody's going to be concerned about Stafford because of the last...
A high of 23 on Sunday.
Yeah, I told you. Cold, bro. Cold. and think about this. You're the Jets. You have nothing to play for. The last thing you want to do is get hurt in week 16, 17, 18, right? Like, come on. The Rams have a lot to play for.
That's
the
Rams
thing is,
I asked Rosenblatt if they would sit Rodgers, and he said no, because he's probably not, we've seen it. There's probably not a plan for the next year, so they're going to be like, what? We don't care. It's not like he's coming back in 2025.
No, he's going to play out the year, and then he's going to hopefully disappear into the darkness. But Stafford is the guy who's playing on the team with something to play for. And I think that motivation is enough for me. Now, granted, you could say that same thing last week, and it was misery in the rain in San Francisco, and it was terrible. But I think also that extra time for a team that's got a Cooper Kupp who's coming off a goose egg. Like, is Cooper Kupp going to have 2 bad games in a row like that? No. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. You're talking about better quarterback, better coach, team with something to play for. I'm going to put all that into the Rams bucket there. And I think the Rams smell like, hey, we smell a playoff spot here. We smell this division. We can go and win this thing. And, Aaron Rodgers back in the 20-degree weather. It's not Florida anymore, kid. I think Stafford's the way I go here. But Drake May's played well here at moments. He just has nothing to work with, which is unfortunate.
That is true. Well, Aaron Rodgers did come from Green Bay. I'm going to be
interesting.
He
did, but you get old, and next thing you know, you're like, I can't play, and it's too cold outside.
I don't want to do this anymore. I'm too old for this blank. All right, let's talk running backs. There are 2 big-ish ones this week, and because one is Alvin Kamara, for all intents and purposes, probably done for the year if the Saints are doing anything like they did. Like, Chris Olave's not coming back. Derek Carr is not coming back. I made the case last week, Joe, on this very podcast of Alvin Kamara is getting shut down. And somebody's like, where'd you hear that from? I'm like, just my mind. Like, I'm smart enough to see, like, they gave him a contract, which shocked all of us, but they gave him a contract extension. It's like, why is he even on the damn field in week 15? So he's out for week 16, probably the rest of the season. So now you have Kendre Miller in play, which we know is very much like Jamal Williams. But you also have Jerome Ford replacing Nick Chubb on his broken foot. Here, I'll make my case, Joe, see if you agree, is why I have Kendre Miller in front of Jerome Ford, because the bell cow work, which I don't think Jerome Ford's going to get. What did we see earlier this year? Deontay Foreman's been inactive. It's not like they've used him since week 8. That's actually the last time they've used him. But when he was active, they gave him first and second down carries. They gave him short yardage goal line. And I'm not saying he's going to have 15 carries, but you siphon off 30%. And what could be an offense led by DTR, I'm taking Kendre Miller even with a Hainer / Rattler / whatever offense.
I was going to say, it's not like the quarterback situation in New Orleans is much
No.
better. I don't love either the Kendre Miller aspect in the cold in Green Bay in 20-degree weather too for that team. Does not look like
they're just not going to throw the ball.
They're not, but also that become very predictable and easy to stop. I would say this: if I'm at a PPR, I feel better about Jerome Ford because I think I've seen him in this offense before. I said this on the
Sorry
show
to jump in, even if you knew it was DTR.
Yeah, I don't think DTR is as bad as everybody else. Like DTR, I think can give you against the Cincinnati Bengals defense enough serviceable play to keep you in it. Like that's how bad the Cincinnati Bengals defense has been this year. I mean, they make Cooper Rush look good. Let's be honest.
Really good.
Really good. Really good. I want to emphasize the really. So with that logic under center, I think that Jerome Ford is the guy in the PPR leagues, and that's where most people are playing. I feel better about. If it was standard or half, I understand the carry volume of Miller being a little bit more intriguing, and maybe the touchdown equity I think is the same basically of the two. So again, in PPR, I'm leaning towards Jerome Ford because I also think when you have those quarterbacks that are limited, you are going to see them in passing situations more often than not because they're making bad decisions and then having to get rid of the ball quickly. So you might be one of these situations where Jerome Ford might have, 5 catches for 40 yards, and that's 9 points right off the bat with some touchdown equity, with some rushing. And I think that is a better mix for me as opposed to just Kendre Miller running into a brick wall of the Green Bay Packers a million times, which I think is probably more likely in a lot of 3-and-outs.
Okay. Then let's go deeper because, Lewis, we have to go deeper for some people.
All right.
You have 3 pass catchers here. Kamani Vidal's got the Broncos at home. Gus Edwards, not surprisingly, not really doing much, and Vidal, but still splitting with Gus Edwards, so it's tough and a tough matchup. You have Justice Hill, has Justice Hillness, and actually if it's a blowout, but they do have the Steelers at home this week, by the way, Saturday, reminder everybody. And then you have Antonio Gibson, who 1 week is mixed in, next week he's not. Then he's mixed in, then he's not. But they at least head to Buffalo, where you would think they would have to mix them in and use them a little bit more. So of those 3, if you had to get desperate for your flex play, which we will talk ranks later this week, or later in the show if you're watching on YouTube, depending, you'll see why I said that, and depending on if you're watching. But of those 3, for week 16 only, which would you pick up off waivers? Because all 3 of them are like 30%.
Yeah, look, the Chargers' run game is really falling apart, hasn't it? Like, and that's all they want to do, and they just can't seem to do it right now.
J.K. Dobbins, the MVP of the Chargers?
No, but you know who should be getting more votes is Baker Mayfield, but that's a story for another podcast. Anyway, Justice Hill is where I'm going with this one. Against Pittsburgh last time, it was the second highest target share that he had. He had 7 targets in that game. The only higher one that he had was 8, which was earlier in the season. So I think in one of those knockdown, drag out Lamar Jackson, Pittsburgh Steelers matchups, which is, what we get more often than not, I could see Justice Hill continuing to, be more useful or a little bit more dependable than the others. I think that's just where I'm at. I'm going to take the guy who's got the best quarterback at the end of the day, and that's clearly Justice Hill.
35 and sunny. I was hoping there was going to be snow in that game. There's not.
No. But the Pittsburgh Steelers are up against it a little bit right now.
Oh, the Steelers could easily lose out. Wouldn't be shocked. We are going to be talking Steelers when we get to the rankings. On the wide receiver side of things, Romeo Doubs, I'm going to just jump to the Packers. Romeo Doubs gets his 2 touchdowns, and it's really frustrating because what do we know about Romeo Doubs heading into this game, Joe? Runs the most routes when he's healthy. He's out there the most. Sometimes targeted the most, sometimes not. He's kind of more of Jacoby Myers of the Patriots. Actually, you know what? He's actually been more of Jacoby Myers of the Raiders this season. And then he scores 2 touchdowns. Christian Watson gets booted back down to number 3. He still had some of the big play upside. It seems like they're mixing him in at least more than they used to at the beginning of the season. But, when healthy again. What's funny is that the Packers have rarely had all 4 of them healthy. I think this is the first game where they've actually played beginning to end, or it was one of the first. Romeo Doubs or Watson, if you had to pick one, would you just go with Doubs? I know, but would you go with Doubs because it's the safest, or would you just shoot for the ceiling and Watson because they're both probably wide receiver 4s for you? So would you just go for the ceiling?
I think Doubs is the touchdown equity, and that's clear. And last time that Christian Watson had a touchdown was week 6 against the Arizona Cardinals.
Last year?
No, it was actually this year. But I mean, he's got, for all the big play upside of Christian Watson, I know health has been a problem for him, but only 2 touchdowns all year. Yeah. So where is this glowing upside? I know he's had in the last 6 weeks 2, 100-yard games, and that's great and all. But look, at this point in the season, when you have 2 guys who are wide receiver 4s, I'm looking for touchdown equity. That 6 points in the playoffs means everything. You get that 6, it doesn't matter because you get a catch and the 6 and whatever yards are with it. That's already 8 points. Boom, you're locked in. And then whatever else is gravy the rest of the game. That's my mentality with it. And I hate it because I like Christian Watson a lot more as a player, but for whatever reason, they just can't seem to get the most out of him. And I do expect Jordan Love to pour it on. So it might be both, might be the answer at the end of the day, will be useful. But if I had to only pick one, Dobbs.
All right, then let's get a few. You got a Pepto-Bismol bottle next to you for this next one?
Because I can get one.
These wide receivers are going to do this to you because we're starting off. Keon Coleman had the best day-ish of anybody not named Khalil Shakir, but it's Keon Coleman, similar to Christian Watson. 1 catch, by the way. But that's more than Cooper had. That's actually more than Cooper had in targets. Cooper, if you looked at the box score, his name doesn't show up, Joe, because he didn't even have a target. That's how bad it was for him. So Amari Cooper, I don't know how you could trust him at all, but that's not what we're talking about for rankings. We're talking about that Coleman is out there because he was out for so much time. He got dropped in a lot of leagues, and now he's available. Speaking of drops, Quentin Johnston is also out there.
Well done.
And 2 weeks in a row, he's found the end zone again. This is the life of Quentin Johnston. It almost feels like, which is he going to get, the drop or the touchdown? Because there's nothing in between. And then the last one, I was surprised people want to get in on this, and I'll tell you, this is why I don't, is Hollywood Brown. Because I can't play him his first game back, let alone if it's Carson Wentz. So you have to see the game to be able to trust him. So even if he returns this week, it's probably with Carson Wentz, and then you're going to say you're going to trust him in your championship game when nobody on this team even runs 70% of the routes. Nobody. So you're telling me you want to buy into Hollywood Brown? So anyway, that's why I'm pushing back against Hollywood Brown for everybody asking. But Coleman, Quentin Johnston, Hollywood Brown, which would you pick up if out there?
It's QJ. And it's not close for me.
Is that why you were chuckling first? Because you can't believe you're about to say it?
No, well, kind of, maybe a little bit. But I mean, let's just run through it. Touchdown in week 9, touchdown in week 10, touchdown in week 11. No touchdowns, 12 and 13, touchdown in week 14, touchdown in week 15. So, yeah, is he going to probably against Denver see something like 10 targets?
Are you going with the San Francisco Giants math? Is that what you're using with it? It's the even years or the
years?
Yeah.
No, but the problem is, as I mentioned before with Doubs, it's the same conversation. It's like I'm rolling the dice for sixes. And who gives me the best chance for the sixth? It's QJ. And is it going to be pretty? No. Is it going to be drops in between? Yes. Keon Coleman has been a non-factor, and Hollywood Brown hasn't played all season. And as you mentioned, it's not like a situation where, the Strange and Mac Jones thing, which we were talking about on a show yesterday too, where it's like, well, these guys have been practicing together. There's a rapport there. There's a timing there. There's a little bit of solidarity there. Nobody's been practicing with Hollywood Brown. Like, nobody's working with this guy. He hasn't been around.
Who's been practicing with Carson Wentz?
Well, I mean, that's a joke for another show. But I think that, at this stage, it's irresponsible to just throw Hollywood Brown into that mix. I understand the temptation to do it. If Mahomes was healthy, maybe I'd be more tempted, some sort of morbid curiosity to find out. I don't think I could get there. I just really don't. So it's going to be QJ. I don't want to say completely by default, but by default, it's QJ. That's it.
By default.
It's QJ. It's QJ. Well, again, sixes, man. He's rolling them sixes. As long as he rolls them sixes, I don't care if he's got 3 catches, 5 catches, 1 catch. Where's that Nick Westbrook Akinye NWI for life, baby? Like that's the game we're playing here down the stretch. It's been him. It's been MVS. It's been QJ. Believe it or not, those are the guys kind of getting the job done. It's just gross.
I was just about to say, mentioning NWI is going to give somebody a pit in their stomach for having a guy like I gave him one more try and didn't work out. Although it was off the fingertips.
I got to get the NWI for life shirt. I got to get that one made up.
That's a good one. So speaking in this vein, week 16, I don't know, 16, I don't want to pause like that. Week 16 championships potentially on the line because you need to get there. You need to make sure whether you're in a 12 team or a 10 team, you're now definitively in the playoffs. So, will these players definitively be in your lineup is what Joe Pisapia and I need to talk about. So, let's come back to quarterback. And this one was interesting to me, Joe, is a lot of people are like, you know what? I want to give CJ Stroud one more chance coming out of the bye. And I said, why? Unless they found a magic pixie dust, you're not fixing the offensive line in the middle. Nope. In week 14, what are you finding to fix that offensive line? So, well, maybe the game plan with Bobby Slowick, and I think I don't want to come for people. That was all tongue in cheek. I don't want to piss people like I'm mocking them, but there was a lot of people that are like, well, they'll get the ball out quicker. That's been Slowick's game. That was what Slowick had Stroud doing last year. It's not like they can get it out even quicker. It would be like hike and throw. They are already a quick offense and trying to make the reads. As we saw, CJ Stroud came out of the bye, nothing. 2 touchdowns, cool, but without the 2 short touchdowns, you got nothing here. Let me ask you this, Joe. Is there any world where you would start CJ Stroud in Kansas City? You know what? Let's go back to the waiver part of this show this week.
Okay.
Anthony Richardson, Jameis Winston, Bo Nix. Does CJ Stroud even enter that tier of the conversation? Or is he in the tier with Caleb Williams and Drake May? Because I say he's in the other tier.
I hate agreeing with you, but I have to. He is in the other tier. And you're right. You can't fix the offensive line unless, the ghost of Anthony Munoz, another great lineman of years past, somehow showed up in the bye week. You're not going to fix these injuries. And it wasn't like they didn't have injuries and problems last year with his offensive line too. And Stroud kind of played through it. I think last year it was a little bit of the people just never bought into the Texans. They were taking them seriously and they took advantage of that. And then, down that stretch, the line got healthy last year and they really kind of took off. And then everyone took them seriously this year. The expectations were all that's very different. And it's the classic sophomore slump, but it's not all of his fault. A lot of it does have to do with that offensive line, has to do with the Nico Collins injury, Stephon Diggs injury, all those injuries, right? And a little bit more of the learning to play with expectations, which is something you would expect out of a young team. But I'm with you 100%. I think we already said Bo Nix, that's the safest guy, despite the road matchup, all that stuff. I don't fear the environment at all being a problem for him. And then the other 2 guys just have massive upside. The only one that gives me pause is Winston. Again, if he plays poorly,
right?
Does he come out of that
game? Does he finish the game?
So Stroud over Winston.
But if I told you 100% of the snaps, Jameis Winston, then we can't know that.
And 100% against the Bengals, I'm saying Winston because it's going to be hilarious and entertaining. And look, if you're gonna lose big. that's
Well,
Jameis Winston way.
Which might happen, but there's a question. So, of course, Carson Wentz. Reminder: Saturday, 1 p.m. is this game. So, if you don't, you like to sleep in on Saturdays, don't forget that's a late sleeping in. But yeah, you never know. You might have a good weekend heading into that. On the other side of the ball are the Chiefs with Carson Wentz, possibly, likely. But the bigger question I had for you, Joe, is where are you going with this Pacheco situation? Because I brought this up to somebody. I was like, this is weird because it was first game back. It was about 50-50. Then he started to increase in a second game. And then last week, it dropped back down to 50-50 with Kareem Hunt. And I was like, maybe this is smart by the Chiefs. Hey, you know what? We don't need anybody. We don't run our wide receivers 70% of the time. We don't use anybody the complete game. Like Travis Kelce doesn't even run 80-something% anymore. It's just like we use everybody and everybody's involved. And then the person who's like pushing back is like, well, it's a revenge game. And I'm like, really? That's what we're doing? No, I don't have to get anything to do with revenge game. I think this now is a concern of, can we even trust Pacheco as an RB2 against the Texans? And I'm kind of leaning no.
I'm leaning no too, but I will say this: as a flex play, Hunt or Pacheco, if you need, I think are viable this week, especially if you do get Wentz. Because look, Kansas City, the regular season for them is just a tune-up for the playoffs.
It's a joke.
It's like it's like the Yankees or these other teams where these very public teams that are measured at a certain
the Warriors run. I always compare it to Warriors run, where they didn't care about the
that's a
number
good
one
comparison too. So these teams are literally just trying to manage through, get everybody healthy. Okay, when's the playoffs start? Because they're only judged by championships, and I think you will see enough volume from both of them, even in the split this particular week and this particular game, especially the way the schedule lays itself out, that I think both are viable flex plays. I don't love them as RB2s, but at this point you have no choice, right? You've lost a lot of these guys to injury, right? Kamara and Chubb and all these other guys that you thought were in this mix here that you felt comfortable about. It's slim pickings. So at least these two guys are in an offense that that the play designs are going to be clever. Andy Reid's going to have this team prepared. And I think there is, the one thing you could trust about the Chiefs is the leadership, and they're going to rally around whatever they have to do and figure it out. And maybe this is even a good thing for the Chiefs to kind of shake them out of a little bit of a funk and a haze that they've been in all season where, oh my God, wow, we rather start picking things up and start playing some good football here for a little momentum. So maybe this is exactly what the doctor ordered, is a little bit of a Mahomes issue where everybody kind of gets the fear of God back in them. But regardless of the split of the volume, I think there's enough volume to carry them through as flex plays.
So the other Saturday game, reminder, Steelers at Ravens, which as of today, I mean, I was honestly, people know this, listen to the podcast, I was taking the Ravens over the Chiefs as it stood anyway. Like, I know the Chiefs, you got to beat the champions, but like, I know they have more losses, but I like the way the Ravens defense is turning the corner. It's not great. It's not great at all, but it has turned the corner. It's not just pass, and have a happy day against them anymore. It's where I'm going with this, Joe, is if there is no George Pickens, because obviously if George Pickens returns, even though the Ravens defense has been playing better, you're playing George Pickens. There's no question about it. The question I have for you, it feels pretty simple to me, and that includes the running backs, where my answer is, without George Pickens, any Steelers player, my answer is no, because it's just like last week. And it's just like last week of why I said, get the hell away from Najee Harris if you can, because this was coming. And the 3 games in a row, you don't run. And guess what? You don't run when they get the Chiefs again next week. Maybe Jalen Warren if you're desperate, but I think I might even go Kareem Hunt, as you just mentioned. Like, I don't want any Steelers not named George Pickens.
I cannot disagree with you again and again. It rubs me the wrong way, especially.
There will be some point.
I know. Okay. Look, well, we had maybe some minor ones in the last segment, but I would say I agree. And also, let's not forget, you're also taking Justin Fields out of the mix too potentially. They came in for the one play, he had the ab injury, and that's another wrinkle of this offense that you can present, which does kind of free up the running backs a little bit when you can run those funky RPO things and some of those, weird different plays that, the playbook opens up when you have Justin Fields on the field. And that was not something they could really do against the Eagles. And I think the Baltimore Ravens, I agree, they get their revenge. Now, Tomlin's always dangerous as an underdog, especially on the road. Right now, you're getting 6.5. So keeping that in mind. But the other thing is, if you don't have Watt potentially for this game, I think you're going to get him. But he's not going to be 100% too. The Steelers are going to be in a weird spot where if the Steelers fall behind early in this game, let's say that Baltimore comes out finally against Pittsburgh and Lamar actually is, had enough, comes out there, puts up 2 touchdowns. I think they have a hard time clawing their way back, and that is another wrinkle in this game too, against the run and against what you're saying too, for those guys like Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. Warren of the two, I would prefer. I agree, but it's going to be tough for the Steelers offense, I think, this week.
Somebody want to tell Derrick Henry it's December? It's like, does he?
Yeah, but I wonder if the Ravens are on that same plan right now as the Chiefs, which is like, hey, look, Derrick Henry's he's an older running back. He's had a ton of mileage. It's maybe just, coast a little bit, or maybe they were just coasting him and giving him 2 weeks off for this game. And that is also very possible, because this is the game that matters. You could close your eyes and beat the Giants. No offense. I know you're a Giants guy, but you could close your eyes and beat that Giants team.
Why does team would beat itself. People let this go? I turned away from them second year of Daniel Jones. I said, I'm not doing this. They're not my team anymore. They have not been my team.
So where do you have a team now or no?
Yeah. This is the year. So the way this happened, for everybody that doesn't know, there's maybe new coming over from Joe Pisapia.
I respect this. I've been saying for years, people who are Jet fans, look, what are you doing? This is a toxic relationship. Get out of it. People get out of real life relationships all the time. This is good. Did you find a healthy relationship with a team?
No, so I actually ruined a team. So here's what happened. So
that makes a lot of sense.
They say they drafted Daniel Jones, and I said, I'm done. I said, but I'll give him 1 year in case I'm wrong. And then his rookie season happened. I'm like, okay, I was not wrong. And it was mixed success. I'll be honest. It wasn't terrible, but I was like, I'm not wrong. I'm done. And everybody got excited. Oh, quarterback for future. And I'm like, I'm done. Especially if they're talking quarterback of the future already in the second year. I'm like, I'm out. I'm not doing this. And at that point, I said, I have to go AFC. And I said, let me find a team that nobody likes. And I was like, you know what? I've always loved blue and red. I really like. Do you know where I'm going with this? And then they drafted.
Patriots fan with me?
No. Oh. They drafted CJ Stroud, and they even got better. Yeah. And now I've ruined the Texans in year 2. CJ Stroud, as you've seen. Because now, yes, it is always me.
The Texans are doing things the right way. They're just a team that snuck up on everybody last year, and a team that wasn't going to sneak up on anybody in year 2. And that's it.
And then anything that went wrong, they got caught. Yeah.
Yes. But I think they'll figure it out next year. And I think they'll, Nico Collins is an alpha wide receiver. I love Nico. You have a quarterback in Stroud. Mixon's been terrific. The defense has some good talent on it. The offensive line is the problem. You could fix that in off season though. That's easy. You could do that. Draft.
I will say,
find free agents. You got cap space. You got a young quarterback who's cheap. You can do those things.
A little bit like Zach with Tiffany Amber Thiessen and Saved by the Bell. There is 5, maybe even 10% of my heart that does want to come back to the Giants. And it's you know what? If they draft Cam Ward, I'll stand in the back. I'll stand in the back of the room and be like, oh, maybe I'll come into this party a little bit. Let's see the layout here. Let me see what else they do. I don't want just one guest showing up and be like, oh, cool. Let's see if things are cool. Let's see if she's talking to anybody else. And then
Well, look, if you want to jump on board with the red, white, and blue Patriots, we'll take you too. We got a quarterback. Everything else.
That's my dad's team. My dad, who doesn't watch sports,
can bond over it.
He's the worst sport. He legit. All right, real quick, we're gonna get back to rankings.
No, I know what you're saying. My dad.
Real quick, because we have to get back. He knew Tom Brady. The end. Didn't even watch Super Bowls. He's not a sports fan. He says he likes teams so much so that you go back to apparently when I was 6, 5. I don't know. There was the World Series with the Mets and the Red Sox, and my mom told me that I was knocking on the door of the bathroom because my dad was taking a crap when the ball went through the legs for the error, because that's how much he cared about sports. And
I can only assume your dad was in the bathroom for the entire Mets postseason though, because it was pretty good. Yeah. Tell him to get back in there for 100.
No, he's a Red Sox fan.
Oh, he's a Red Sox. Oh, there's a Mets fan like you were. Oh my God.
Wow. Yeah. So he's Red Sox and Patriots, and then Rangers and Knicks to explain this whole thing. He doesn't even make sense. I love my dad so much, but he makes zero sense when it comes to sports. Barely would ever watch it, and somehow I'm a huge sports nut. But anyway, back to rankings. This is what we need to talk about. And everybody's she's like, all right, shut the hell up, Jake. We've heard this story before. All right. Speaking of the Giants, Tracy's off the table, right? There's no way you can trust him in week 16 or 17.
Last week, I didn't trust him this past week. I was like, look, this is terrible. You got to move on. And then the fact that the touchdown was Devin Singletary, talk about giving a paper cut and pouring lemon juice in it. That's just the worst. That had to just suck so hard for anybody who just had no choice, had to play Tracy. And then you watch Devin Singletary walk into the end zone. Oh, brutal. But
would you though? in this game go back to Darnell Mooney after leaving you dry, because if you were relying on Darnell Mooney to save your week, you probably didn't get there, so you're not advancing. But if you didn't need him on Monday Night Football and you already had a great week, you're okay. But he gets the Giants at home, and he gets Kirk Cousins as his quarterback. Hasn't changed. So Darnell Mooney, do you roll back to it? Here, I'll give you a toss-up. We've talked a lot about the
He's
Packers.
Top 36 guy. I do.
More Doubs or Mooney?
Dobbs.
Okay. Mooney or Watson?
Watson. I'm still going with the better quarterback. I have to.
Okay.
I but Mooney's still on that fringe right there. He's like right around, like, even the ECR and Fantasy Pros, he's at like wide receiver 35, 36. And I think that's right. Like, he's a guy you could start as your third wide receiver. They're at home against the Giants. The Giants have nothing to play for. There's no way that defense wants again, this is that time of year where defenses say, what time is my flight in week 18? I want to go home, or I'm going to Hawaii or wherever I'm going to. Like, you're out. Not for the Pro Bowl, mind you. You're just going to get warm. That's where you go, especially if you play in New York.
Oh, let me get you. Would you roll out Quentin Johnston on Thursday Night Football or wait for Mooney?
Ooh, that is a good one. That is a really good one.
Do you ever, as you're thinking, do you ever play the, when I have a toss-up, I might just throw out the guy on Thursday because it gives me extra information?
No, because that to me is like the biggest default nonsensical logic you could possibly. It's like, I love the people like, I just like to play Thursday night players because I like a little action on Thursday night. Like, that's
oh no, I wasn't going with that.
No, but that's a reason. But it's not. Again, what is it informing? Except, do you want to play the better player, the better situation, or you want to just
No, but it's a coin flip. No. But if it's at this, so like what I'm saying, like it's a coin flip where you get the, hey, Quentin Johnston left me with 2. I need to shoot more upside at my other position. I was thinking does as coin flip, or Quentin Johnston came out and gave me 15. Now I can go so this is your wide receiver 3, Quentin Johnston versus Mooney, and then your flex play might be between a pass catching running back or another Quentin Johnston type, and it kind of gives you that extra piece of information. That's kind of where I was going with it.
I'm probably going to lean towards Mooney.
Okay.
Environment's, a thing here against the Giants at home. Like, I just think, you could say the same thing about the Raiders game, and I know I also don't think you're going to. When a player has a game like that, like we just saw the AJ Brown thing. When a wide receiver is unhappy, typically they let it be known, and usually it doesn't go, unfounded that, we look and go, oh, wow, we only got 1 target to Darnell Mooney. Like, you can't do that. Like, that's not been the case. Now, I think teams have figured out, too, that, if you put too much on London, Mooney's going to kill you. So I think that's changed a little bit, but I don't think the Giants have the kind of defensive mind at this point to make
They've already put, to your point about their defense, there's already been more players put on the IR and
right. They're all like, it's like, and that's the thing I keep saying about Detroit too. Like, don't be surprised if Detroit was the team that was great in the regular season and just falling apart at the end. If you look at how many Detroit defensive players are on IR right now, it's like 8 of them. It's nuts. It's nuts. It is. So
who would you take in the NFC right now? Would you take still Detroit? Still Detroit?
I gotta say, I think I said this yesterday too, the dysfunctional Eagles remind me a lot of like the late 70s Yankees, where they just hated each other, but it didn't matter. They just kind of win. They don't like the manager, right? They don't like the coach. They don't like each other. There's something about the dysfunctionality that also just kind of fits. I lived in Philly for a long time, so that self-loathing hatred of everybody, but we're going to go win anyway. It kind of, it tracks. It tracks. And I think the Eagles look around like, what do the Eagles do? They run the football and they play defense. That would scare the hell out of me in the playoffs, because that's the team that really do that. And when Montgomery comes out of that equation, everyone's like, well, they still got Gibbs. I'm like, yes, they have Gibbs, and Gibbs is great. But Monty gives them that other kind of runner that you want in January.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Gibbs is up for that specific task.
No, I'm 100% with you, and especially with their next 2 games being what should be more that they needed the Montgomery. But the other thing I was going to go back to is I was making this argument for the Eagles for weeks now when I was doing Pat's show, because Pat and I have been doing rankings. He wanted to do power rankings this year. And I was like, everybody's making the case, as you said, and I'm not saying that you're saying this. I'm saying we were talking about the Chiefs and saying, like, the Chiefs are kind of coasting by. And, like, we know the Chiefs are better than this when they decide to turn it on. I said, look at the Eagles. They have not, to date, had 1 game where everybody's been problem-free. It's been A.J. Brown hurt, Devonta Smith hurt, Saquon Barkley left the game last week. Like, he didn't even, like, they haven't had a complete game, and now A.J. Brown potentially hurt too. So this is the other question I wanted to ask you. So this is, to you, why I agree with you. I think the Eagles are the biggest threat. But I also made this argument. I'm curious if you're with me on this. This is coming from somebody, and I know Joe's take, and I know how he feels of this, but I'm going to let him explain. But I'm bell cow running back in fantasy and life. Like, I believe when you have elite level running backs, not good, not great even, elite running backs, there's a difference between elite and good running backs.
Sure.
Now, when you get to great and good, the drop-off is very replaceable. The biggest thing I kept saying about the Eagles is if A.J. Brown is out, that's a bigger loss than if Saquon Barkley was out, because going from Saquon to Kenneth Gainwell is less than going from A.J. Brown to what happens to this team without A.J. Brown. That was my case.
Yeah. Look, the A.J. Brown thing, we'll monitor that, but, at this stage, I would have to agree with you that Saquon Barkley is obviously the difference maker on this team, and this is a team that has always had good offensive lines to run the football, despite not having, as you said, elite talent to run the football with. And now when you add in elite talent to run the football with on a very good run offensive line, I mean, Jason Kelsey's probably looking around going, man, if I should have stuck around one more year to play with Saquon. I think that's what makes the Eagles so difficult. And I do think that the Packers, I do think that the Vikings are also teams that could really give, there's that familiarity too. And the teams in your division are built to face the teams in your division. And if you're the Lions, I think that's also troubling, because what you're looking at is teams that are designed to try to beat you. And now you're going to have to see them 3 times potentially, right? Twice in the regular season, maybe once in the playoffs. Can you beat them 3 times? It's a lot. It's a lot to ask, I think, of any team. And that typically doesn't go very well. And if Dan Campbell keeps making stupid decisions the way he does in the biggest spots, it's like the bigger the spot, the dumber the decision. And I thought he might have, and I gave him a pass last year because they were rolling and riding high, and I didn't like it when it happened in the championship game. I thought this is gonna kill them. This is a stupid idea. Just keep running out the clock, play boring Bill Belichick football, and they refused to do that. And then they lost. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, that had to be the hard learning lesson here for Dan Campbell.
And it wasn't.
Apparently it's not. Apparently, no. He's doubling down on it. How you kick the ball, an onside kick. If this was a prize onside kick, okay, cool. Because you and I would both say nobody was thinking that was coming. You know why? Because it's stupid with 12 minutes left to have an onside kick. But you can't even do that nowadays. You have to announce it. Everybody has to come up and they know it's an onside kick. So now, okay, it's an onside kick. Here we go. That is what's most troubling to me, is that he had to announce the stupidity and nobody else is willing to pull him off of that ledge and say, stop being so stupid.
You know what Dan Campbell is? He's the guy that, he puts the buzzer in his hand and shows it to you. He's like, here, shake my hand.
That is a perfect analogy. I love that. That's a really good analogy.
Let's go back to some more of these rankings decisions. And originally for this one, my question was, I don't want any. Joe, you make the case. So I'm going to take it one step further, because it's not just, I don't want any, Joe, you make the case, maybe you do, for the Colts. It's on both sides of the ball. Joe, you make the case for anybody not named Calvin Ridley at wide receiver. Is there a case for anybody because for me, it's nobody.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It is tough. And I think Downs and Pittman are talented wide receivers. I like them as players. Tennessee is going to be tricky. I would say, Pittman did have 6 for 58. He had 9 targets. So I think from the volume standpoint, Pittman, I feel a little bit more comfortable with. If I had, I need a wide receiver.
It was Downs before this.
It was Downs before this, but I'm just not sure how healthy Downs really is. I think he's come back here. He's trying to play out the season. And just because the guy's not on the injury report doesn't mean he's healthy. You know what I mean? So I think that is something this time of year we have to keep in mind. And I know that's a little inside baseball nonsense, but it's true. And despite the 9 targets, he still finishes wide receiver 50 because the inefficiency of those targets from Richardson. So I think what you do is you would take your 12 points that you can get from Pittman, as opposed to maybe you get 20 from Downs, or maybe you get 2 from Downs. And that's, you can't have that happen.
You know what's happening, right? Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is going to pop back up and be like,
"Oh, he's going to touchdowns this week." I want to play him so bad in flex against Derek Brown this week. You have no idea, and I probably will just for comedy of it. Because if I beat him, it's great. But if I beat him with Nick Westbrook-Ikhine having 2 touchdowns after all year, him yelling at me on our shows, you can't keep starting this guy. You can't keep picking up this guy. And I'm like, why? All he does is score touchdowns. I know it doesn't make sense. I know it's not sustainable. But damn it, it keeps happening. So what are we doing? Why are we letting someone else?
I would love for it to come back. All right, so speaking of the Kings coming back, there's somewhat of a segue here. First time for the Washington Commanders against the Eagles was not pretty. It was actually the worst we've seen of Jaden Daniels. Shocking. The Eagles at that point's defense was also much better than it was at the beginning of the season. But we're also talking a brief turnaround. This was only a few weeks ago, and now we've got the rematch. Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin probably got you here. Brian Robinson probably got you here. But you don't run and you don't pass on the Eagles anymore. You don't do anything against them. But it kind of feels like you have to. But, Joe, is there a case that we always say, start your suds, trust you who got here. Is there a case when it's this rough of a matchup, how bad it was the first time around, that you say, you know what? I know start your studs, but maybe I'm thinking twice. Is there, of any of the three, would you think twice?
No. Here's why. They are the guys that got you there. I think Jaden Daniels has shown you that he is not one to shy away from big moments and challenges. In fact, he tends to step up and play better in those. And I think it was good for him to have the Eagles knock him around a little bit. I'm not saying they're going to win this football game, but I think they've got something to prove in this football game. And I think it was, in a way, you came off the bye in a game you should have beaten the crap out of the New Orleans Saints. And yeah, they won that game comfortably, basically, but they didn't blow their doors off, and they probably should have.
No.
And I think it's because they're looking ahead to that Eagles game. I think that's all that's been on their mind since before the bye is like, let's get one more shot against the Eagles to test ourselves. So I think they're going to show up in this game. And I don't know what the alternatives are. Certainly there's no alternative that makes me want to take out Jaden Daniels. There's hardly anybody I want to take out Terry McLaurin. Maybe in 2 wide receiver leagues. Yeah, you're loaded in a 10-team 2 wide receiver league. Okay. You have those kind of problems. And the same you could say of B-Rob. But the way the running back landscape is right now, I'll take my chances with Brian Robinson, especially because Eckler's still out. With Eckler still being out, I think Brian Robinson still has his majority run of this backfield. Is it a good matchup? No. But I wouldn't be surprised if Washington pushed the total, or even in garbage time just didn't quit and continue to put up points, because I think this is the measuring stick. If you're the Washington Commanders going into next year, is like, how do we learn to compete with the Eagles? And you don't learn by not trying to compete. You've got to get out there, and even if you're losing, it's 30 to 14. You got to go out there in the fourth quarter and try to put some points on the board and get a little free and loose. And Daniels, when he gets free and loose with the football, is very special. Like, he's just going to throw that ball. And we've seen those 80-yard receptions for Terry McLaurin in these weird spots where he's like, all right, I'm just going to throw it up there.
Dude,
and it's a lot.
I said that during the play this past week, that when he legit put the ball on the ground, turned around, and it was just like, F it, I know Terry's down there somewhere. Yeah. And it worked out. So, I love that. All right, 3 more topics, get you out of here. Okay. This is a toss-up, and I have a feeling you're going to come with me on this one because phrasing, that was bad. Cardinals at Panthers. Cardinals at Panthers. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for canceling this podcast. Cardinals at Panthers. Marvin Harrison, I said, here's the problem right now, is not only just rookie, can't get on track, it's actually the fit with what he does, and Kyler Murray just isn't meshing. I didn't expect this. Let me make that clear. But as watching this season, it's not meshing with the way that Kyler Murray plays football, and you'll see it because Marvin Harrison.
Is it not meshing how Kyler Murray plays football, or how they use Marvin Harrison? One of the best route runners in the game runs 2
Yes.
routes.
So no, that's where I'm going with this. It's like, you're not wrong. Marvin Harrison destroys man coverage. He is terrific at it. The problem is Kyler Murray's better against zone, because what is Kyler Murray? He's short. I've broken that down before. Like Drew Brees before him, like Bryce Young now. When you're short, it does matter. You have to find lanes. But finding those lanes to throw and find vision often works better against zone, unless you have that rapport of, I know he's going to be here, I'm throwing it, I'm anticipating a window. Most quarterbacks have to anticipate a window. When you're in this style of like a Kyler Murray, Drew Brees, to go back to him, the best ever at it, it's anticipating the window before the window is even open, before it is even developed. Like, it's the window before the window. So that's where I'm saying with this, is where the consistency. But all that is a complete sidebar, because I'm going right back to somebody who I had inside my top 25 wide receivers, and I know people hate me for this. However, Bryce Young, if he just would have thrown that ball a little bit better, Adam Thielen not only has a big play, probably a touchdown on that. Adam Thielen in my lineup over Marvin Harrison, because that's who I trust more now in Week 16 at this point of the season.
I don't think that's crazy at all.
I got to get you to disagree with me before we get on the show.
Look, I hate this. I mean, I don't know, but I think what we're at here is
Here we go. Eli Manning's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
First ballot, no, but he is a Hall of Famer. I hate
See, I
that
could get you
too.
to disagree on something.
Yeah, not first ballot. Do you think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer?
I think he'll probably be because, like I've said
You
this
gotta make him
before,
wait
even
a
as
little bit.
even as a Giants fan back then, you swap him and Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers is in the Hall of Fame. Like he wasn't the better quarterback. He was the better. He was
absolutely a better quarterback.
He was a quarterback that has 2 Super Bowl wins. That's
against Tom Brady, which means something, and goes on the road and beats the Packers and Green Bay. Like that stuff matters in those big spots. But anyway, that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
I think the volume that you're getting and the consistency of that relationship with Thielen and Bryce Young, even from last year, is just real. That rapport is real. It's a good spot, and I think the floor is higher, maybe even the ceiling's higher, which I hate saying. But my frustration with Kyler Murray is boundless, and my frustration with the play calling and use of Marvin Harrison is right behind it, because Marvin Harrison Jr. is one of the most prepackaged, ready-made wide receivers to come into the NFL and have success. And the fact that he has struggled most of the season to find that success is mind-numbing to me. And how do you not go back? I understand the first 6 weeks, but how to a certain point do you not look at that first half of the season even and say, okay, we've got to make some adjustments here. And Kyler Murray, look, has not played great, and in these big spots continues to make bad decisions and let you down. So I don't know, man. It is tough, and I was a very, very heavy Marvin Harrison Jr. drafter going into this year because of that reason. He can't miss. He is so good. He is so prepared. He's so ready up here.
Targets,
everything. Right, the volume should go to him. But I mean, think about it too. This is also an offense that Trey McBride's going to catch 100 balls and not catch a touchdown. So
you ever have a tweet that you wish
the Arizona the Arizona Cardinals? We're in baseball season already. Stop talking baseball with me.
Do you ever have a tweet that you're like, man, I thought that was funny. That should have done better. Like you ever have one of those? Because
that what Kyler Murray is?
No, it's Trey McBride this weekend, and I tweeted out a GIF from Beavis and Butthead. It's Beavis, and I did Trey McBride handshake Beavis, and it's a GIF of him saying, "Why don't we ever score?" And like
that's funny.
See, like that should have went
Next
off.
time you have a funny tweet, send it to me, and I'll interact with it, and then it'll just take off. That's
the other thing. I canceled my subscription to the blue check, so I think now I just get trampled. Like nobody gets to see my tweets anymore. I actually found out everybody out there that listening. I'm
much about tweets.
No. Because I want to interact with the people. I was just about to say this. I apologize. I answer a lot of questions. I found this out. They also smush or squash or whatever. Like you don't see as many replies anymore either when you get rid of the blue check. Like you don't show up in my alerts, but if I click on the tweet, then I can see. So I've actually missed questions so thank you. And like I actually have a Tesla, by the way, but thank you a lot for Elon Musk for ruining Twitter for all of us.
Well, I mean, yes, and also when you put a link to anything outside, it kills it. There's a lot of things, but besides killing all your tweets, I mean, Arizona.
Are you on Blue Sky?
No, I look, I do the social media, I post the links, I answer questions, I have good interactions with there, and then I go about the rest of my day. And you should too. But here's the thing: you have Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr. If I took those two players and dropped them in to an offense with even Jane Daniels, right, who's a rookie quarterback, Baker Mayfield, right? Imagine how good those seasons would be if you just took those two guys and dropped them in Tampa, right? What's going on here? It's the coordinator, it's the quarterback. Something's got to give, something's got to change here. And the approach is just poor. So either they're going to get a new OC. I don't think they're going to get a new quarterback because they're paying him. Like, I don't see that happening. I will say this. It is not the greatest quarterback class. And if you think you can do better at quarterback by trading Kyler Murray, I bet you can get a lot of draft picks for him because there's a lot of quarterback needy teams in the NFL. So this might be an interesting time if you can get out of that contract to get out of it, because you can't have that kind of talent around you and fail every time. Like, I mean, the failure rate for the Cardinals is stunning this year to me with all that talent they have.
You're not wrong. And for people, I don't want to see at the end of the season any like victory lapping on Kyler Murray because he finished as a QB1 because he's only QB 16 in points per game behind some other names. So like it's like he definitely didn't have the season people were hoping for by far. But as we get out of here, a quarterback who is having the season people have hoped for because he's going to get his MVP unless he falls flat on his face. But it's not about Josh Allen. It's about his wide receivers. Talked about on waivers. Amari Cooper disappeared, doesn't show up in the box score. Keon Coleman comes back. If you're in week 16, Joe, is the answer hips don't lie at the end? Or would you take a gamble on Cooper or Coleman this week?
It's Shakir. It took me a second to get your joke, but I got it.
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah.
Because when you say that, I just start thinking about Shakira and not football. I think that's really the reason. It is
to pause here.
Shakir. And this is why Josh Allen's winning the MVP. And this is why I said it 6 weeks ago when it was still plus money. It was still plus 340, plus 410 in some markets. And I told everybody, look, bet it now, because if you're talking about the biggest profile guy who hasn't won an MVP, it's a media-driven award. He's doing it with hardly any help. He really is. He is literally putting this team on his back and finding ways to win. And the subtraction of Stephon Diggs, I have to say, I'll take the L on this. I thought that this was the closing of the window for the Buffalo Bills and the retooling year. It's not. It's been their best year because you've taken that element out of it. And Josh Allen has had to become a better quarterback, reading defenses, making good decisions, not trying to just funnel the football to one guy. He has become a more complete player, the best version of Josh Allen, by taking that star player away. And now it's a matter of, can you grow Keon Coleman next year into a star player? Can Shakir take another step forward? Cooper wasn't the right match for whatever reason. Yeah. You tried. It looked good on paper. I think all of us went, wow, this is a great idea. It hasn't worked out. Deontay Johnson hasn't worked out. I think a lot of these guys, Devontae Adams hadn't really worked out until last week. So it's kind of been a tough run for all of those traded wide receivers, even Hopkins, that we thought were going to be, look, this is a great move. And it really hasn't been all that great, at least most of the time. But Allen has elevated everybody, and it's been a fantastic job by him. And Shakir's the only guy besides James Cook. I feel James Cook can have a big game too. I could see him going over 100 rushing yards in this one. Patriots don't tackle anybody.
Speaking of elevated, Joe Pisapia elevated this show this week. Make sure you follow, and it may sound tongue-in-cheek, but there's truth behind it, because Joe Pisapia, at Joe Pisapia, if I could even say your name right, at Joe Pisapia 17, yes. I feel like we need to recreate CM Punk's Seth Rollins on Monday Night Football. I was about to say Monday Night Football, Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, January 6th, you and me, going at it.
Yeah. Go at it. Remind everybody, all the podcasts, all the great stuff that you can find
Jake and myself in the main event on Netflix in January, fighting each other. But yeah, of course, Joe Pisapia 17, Fantasy Pros, Betting Pros, Sports Grid TV every Sunday, giving you 2 hours in the morning, getting you ready for your lineups. And yeah, man, always good to hang out and chat with you. And I'm sorry Jay couldn't be here today, but it was nice to spend some quality time, just the two of us.
No, 100%. And do more of that this offseason, and make sure you're following Joe, as I said, and go Mets. Yeah, let's get some more signings.
How did we not talk about Juan Soto this whole time? I'm so excited, Jake. Oh my God, because I'm so excited. I don't care how much money it was. I'm so excited.
We'll have to talk about it after the podcast real quick, because otherwise it would have been way too long. Out of here.